G'day everyone. Welcome to Get Lost with a Travel Guide with your name, Ben. Today we've got a comedian all the way in the United States called Forrest Shaw. Now I'm just going to look at this introduction, which I've ripped off, completely reference your website, Forrest. Forrest is a stand-up comedian and writer who's featured on the Conan O'Brien show. Forrest's debut stand-up special, Poor Decisions, released on Amazon Prime. Don't think it's in Australian Amazon Prime, but in the United States. He's performed at comedy festivals all throughout North America. Forrest co-hosts the I Don't Know About That podcast with one of, if not Australia's biggest comedian, Jim Jefferies. And something that's really sparked my interest is looking through Forrest's Instagram and found that you've done a lot of travel. Now, I don't know if you're a natural world traveler or it's resulted to being a touring comedian, or perhaps it's a bit of both. But I'd really like to introduce and welcome Forrest Shaw to the podcast. And how are you, mate?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing well, mate. Yeah, once again, thanks for doing the pod. We were just speaking moments ago. What were you drinking? You had a can of...
Liquid Death.
Liquid Death.
Water. It's water from the Austrian Alps.
Right.
Supposedly. I don't know. But yeah, it's I guess it's a big thing. I don't know. It's like they'd have a great marketing campaign. It looks like you're drinking a beer, but you're drinking water. So for alcoholics that need to be at a bar that can't drink. But it's pretty good. They have it in a lot of green rooms at comedy clubs. That's where I first saw it. And I was like, oh, this is so stupid. Who would drink this? And here I am with it at my house.
Just going for a nice leisurely walk. Whereabouts are you? Are you in LA?
Los Angeles. That's where I live. I'm from Miami, Florida originally, but I live in Los Angeles.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
So really like to get started. Is my introduction correct? Is there anything false about it?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, I've done all those things. So yeah, and where I'm currently doing those things. So that's good. I thought it was going to get into when you have to do these biographies, whether you're a comedian or a musician or like an entertainment, and you know, they always make you write some other prose too. And I think mine is like, he talks about his faults and failures and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I thought you were going to read that, you know, like he likes cats. And I don't know. That stuff is really cringy, but no, that was fine. That's just what
you had. You studied marine biology there. Not just thinking of George Costanza, always want to be a marine biologist. Was there something? I don't know. But yeah, completely stole that off your website. But how did you get, you know, from liking cats or marine biology to being involved in stand-up or being a comedian or being a writer? How did it happen?
I like that it starts with liking cats. You think that's where my life started? Liking cats, and then...
Could have been. I don't know. Might have had the light bulb moment.
I don't know. I mean, I've talked about it before, not on your podcast, but I always wanted to be a marine biologist. I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I grew up on the water, in the water, underwater. Like I was just on the water. And so I was always obsessed with it. And that's what I like studied to be. And then I got a job doing it. So I did that for a while. And then like anything, like, you know, grass is always greener type thing. Like as the longer you stay in a job, the further you get away from the things that you love about that job, you know, because you get promoted or most of the time you get promoted, hopefully, unless you suck at your job. And then you're just, you know, but as I got promoted in that job, I was just at a desk eventually. And that wasn't what I signed up to do. And that was kind of coincided with the time that I decided to start doing stand-up. Because I always wanted to do that too, but I just never did. And then I kind of was like, oh, let me do that before I regret not doing that, among other things, you know? And I did it and I was absolutely terrible at it. And, I said, let's keep doing this. Let's keep making people miserable at open mics until you get good at it. That's what stand-up is.
Why did you suck? I mean, when you first started, were you just in like little comedy clubs, like amateur mic night, just 5 minutes of material?
Honestly, if anyone tells you they were good at it from the very beginning, then they're lying, you know? Like you'll have a set that's good and you'll have moments that are good, but you're not just like, hey, I'm good at this from the beginning. There might be some people, you know? I heard Dave Chappelle was pretty good at the beginning. You know, maybe he just was like, maybe he was like, you know, but he's at this other level too of these, you know. But for most comedians, I think at the beginning, it's a consistency thing. Like you'll have a good set and you'll make people laugh and then you'll come back and you'll bomb and you're like, what did I do wrong? I did the same thing, you know? So at the beginning, it's kind of rough, you know, and I'm sure like someone might comment on this. Well, you still suck at it. I don't give a fuck what you think. Well, the person on this podcast, I don't know. Is this a family friendly podcast?
No. It's, I mean, we don't really swear. You can swear, like I've sweared occasionally, but it's a podcast that's more sort of entertaining, but also educational.
Oh, wow. Sorry.
So travel and touring. No, but it's you're just being yourself, and that's what all you want to be. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to shit and fuck just to balance it out, just to ease it up a bit.
I'll bleep all that out. But yeah, and then I started doing it, and then someone gave me some money to do stand up one night. One night I did stand up in Punta Gorda, Florida. It's on the west coast of Florida, and I drove over there on a Wednesday night. I still had my day job, and I did about 20 minutes of comedy, and they passed around a tip jar, and then at the end they divided it up, and I got $27. That was the first amount of money I got for comedy. And I called everybody, and I was like, wow, I got paid to tell jokes. And that was kind of like this first moment where I was like, maybe I could do this. And, you know, years and years and years go by, and then eventually you start to get into that network of, okay, I'm working clubs, I'm doing this, there's somebody doing this corporate gig, TV spot, maybe I can try for that. And it just kind of snowballs from there, you know. And you know, I was fortunate to meet some people along the way that helped me, including Jim Jefferies, the aforementioned, you know.
How did the first connection, how did that initiate? How did that start?
By accident, because so Jim started in Australia, but not really, you know. He really started his comedy career in England. That's where he got big, you know. He left Australia and got big in England, but he wasn't really known in the States. And I remember a friend of mine, Al Jackson, who is friends with Jim as well. He called me one night and he goes, yeah, I'm doing a warm-up gig for this HBO taping. And I go, for who? He goes, Jim Jefferies. And I go, who's Jim Jefferies? Like, I didn't even know who he was. How's he doing an HBO spot? Like, you know, it was like, thought I knew everybody in comedy, but that's like, you know. And he goes, yeah, I don't know either. And he called me in between the two tapings. And he goes, this guy's amazing. Like, he's really funny. And I go, oh, cool. I'll have to check him out sometime. Literally 2 weeks later, I get assigned to work the Miami Improv. It's like my home club. And I'm working with Jim Jefferies. So I met him 2 weeks later after I didn't even know who he was. We did the shows.
So, yeah, you'd build up a bit of a profile at that stage. So, yeah. And
a little bit locally. Just locally in South Florida and around Florida. I would tour around Florida and do all these, you know, they call them, there's the A-list rooms. I was like hosting or middle acting, they call it, feature act, you know. At those clubs around Florida. And then I would headline around some of the other C rooms, you know, or something like that. But I met him, I did that show. And then over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks, I kept doing comedy clubs where I was working with Jim Jefferies by complete coincidence. And we got along really well, and we vibed well, you know, and seemed to like kind of bonded on some of the similar things that we like and stuff. And then he started growing in popularity once that HBO special came out, and he kept touring around the United States. And anytime he was in the Southeast United States, he'd hit me up. Hey, you want to do this gig? You want to do that? Then when I was in LA, he let me stay at his house. And we just became friends that way. And we just had a lot in common. And it's a vibe more than that, you know, like with comics, like, you know, you like to hang around other comedians and you're a comedian. And then when you find ones that you really get along with, well, that's who you gravitate towards, because that becomes your whole life and you're a comedian. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've known him for however long that was. I don't know, 14 years now, 15 years. I'd have to figure it out. I think, you know, quit my day job in 2010 and just only did comedy. So I was no longer marine biologizing.
How was that feeling? And how did the people when you're doing marine biology, because like the opposite ends of the spectrum, doing comedy and marine biology, were they supportive, or did you have to sort of keep it under wraps? They're like, hey, I've got this side hustle happening, but
no. People wanted to come out and see me, and you know, and no, they were into it. I'm trying to see if I have my resignation letter here. I had it somewhere. That's why I put on my glasses, because I can't see anymore. So, fun fact. Wait, letter. What? No, that says love letter. I don't even know what that is. But the people that I worked with were very supportive. And, you know, I started doing so much of it that I think they thought it was probably inevitable that I was going to do comedy full time, you know? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they didn't. But I had a lot of people come out. And even when I go back home now, people still come out for my old job and stuff. But They were supportive. My family was always supportive, so I was lucky because some people are. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so I worked for the county government in Miami-Dade County. I sent this to the government. They have this somewhere on file. It's a memorandum, resignation memo. And it says, please let this memo serve to inform you I'll be resigning my position of Environmental Resources Project Supervisor with DERM. Final day of work will be October 8th, 2010. After more than 12 years of service with the county, I've decided to enter the highly unstable and low-paying career field of stand-up comedy. At this point in my life, I feel it is best to walk away from a fulfilling job in my field of study to instead be judged and often strongly disliked by a group of strangers. Each night as I lay awake in an uncomfortable hotel bed, hoping to make enough money through t-shirt sales to pay for my phone bill, I will take comfort in the choice I made to leave a stable and satisfying job. And then I wrote some kind of nice stuff, but I actually sent that in as a resignation letter. What an idiot. But,
yeah, but it kind of typifies it. I mean, as I said, like you're getting paid to write and make people laugh. Yeah. Some people work really hard, just go to the backyard barbecue and, try and entertain, but you're getting paid for it. I don't know what it's like. I'm considering doing that. I got friends locally in Newcastle. Do you know where that is in Australia?
I do. I've done a solo show in Newcastle.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa, hang on. What? Hang on. Where do we even start with that? Like, I think you were saying before
The Crown and Anchor. Is that the name of it? Yeah.
That is correct. I think I know the guy because I'm friends with a bunch of like amateur comics around Newcastle. And I was talking to one of them and I said, hey, I might be doing a podcast with this guy called Forrest Shaw. He's like, really? I think I opened for that guy at the Crown and Anchor. And he was telling me how all the sound technical difficulties just absolutely bombed and he had to like voice and project. Is that you remember Newcastle?
Yeah. So I did a podcast. I only do podcasts with people in Australia from Newcastle, apparently, because his name is Jay, and I can look it up, but his last name is Jobin, Jobin, I believe. But he interviews a lot of musicians and stuff. And gosh, it's called, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering this actually. Night Moves, not Night Moves. I forget the name of his podcast. I gotta look it up now, but I did his podcast. He came down to Sydney and interviewed me when I was opening up for Jim. And then I came through Australia and did my own tour one time. And that would have been like beginning of 2019, maybe. And he arranged a show for me at the Crown and Anchor upstairs. So there's an upstairs there where they can have a little hall. And he got the open. I don't know who the openers were. He definitely got openers. There was definitely a lighting issue more than a sound issue.
Right.
There, like as the sun went down, there was just lights on the ceiling. So I ended up sitting on a table underneath this light, like literally sitting on a table underneath this light. And yeah, and that was how people were able to see me. The show was fun though. I was pretty impressed that anybody would come out in Newcastle, let alone anywhere in Australia, to come see me, even though I had opened for Jim and I was already working on his show and on the other podcasts he used to have and stuff. So that was cool. But I also have a good friend of mine, Claire, that lives there, that she still lives there. And she's moved back and forth to Sydney, but she's like lived there for years. So I stayed at, man, I'm trying to remember the name of the bar. I stayed upstairs from a bar that was there. Gosh, what's the name of it?
Oh, there's too many of them now. It'd be hard. It'd be rattling 20, 30 different names to finally get it.
It's a pretty popular bar. And man, I can't even remember what street it was on, but I'm going to look it up as we talk. But yeah.
Well, yeah. That's crazy because I think, you said you've been to Australia 5 times and I just would have presumed, I mean, I heard you've been in Newcastle. I'm like, really? Like people internationally are actually coming into town. But when's the first time you visited Australia?
Jim, by the way, Jim's coming there on his next tour in June or July.
Right.
He's coming through Newcastle. I think he's like hitting every spot he can hit on his way back through there. Like he's going to like Wollongong, I think, and Canberra is a capital, but he doesn't.
Will you be joining?
I might not be. I don't know. I've gone with him almost every trip in the last however many years, but this one I might not be. We'll see. But I as of right now, I'm not, but I might be.
What are your thoughts of the country? Like, I mean, when you're doing stand-up in the United States or stand-up in Australia, do you have to like change or alter your material because of the different sort of cultural I mean, there's similarities, but there might be those little 1% of differences.
Not really. It's in Australia. I mean, you have the internet now, so it's like, and we kind of know what's going on. Especially more, Americans were very self-centered. People know more about what's going on in America than we know in other countries, for the most part. I'm not saying all Americans, but there was like a joke I had about a candy bar that didn't exist. That one of the punchlines tags had a candy bar, and it didn't exist. Or maybe it did. It's called Butterfinger, and but see, I don't think that exists in Australia. So I had to change it to Snickers, which is a candy bar that exists in the United States.
Yeah.
That also exists in Australia. And the reason I changed it to Snickers, even though it wasn't as funnier, is I knew I'd remember that because it was a candy bar we had in the United States. Butterfinger was way funnier. I think that's the only thing I ever changed in Australia. And when I go to countries where English isn't their first language, because I have toured all over the world by myself and with Jim too, I've been all throughout Europe, parts of the Middle East, Asia, Southeast Asia, Jim said something to me because he had more experience with this. I said, what if they don't understand my references and this and that? We're in Sweden right now, in Stockholm. And he goes, well, English isn't their first language. They'll just think it's their fault and they'll blame themselves. They won't blame you. And I go, oh yeah, that is a good point. I never thought about that. So in some countries, and Sweden's a good example, is they understand a lot of what's going on, but they're also appreciative that you're there and doing the comedy. So they'll find the rhythm of your jokes. And they'll hear when you're like, ba-ba-ba-da, and you do the punchline, and then they're like, so even if they don't understand, they're like, we appreciate what they're doing. I can't do that. But in Australia, I felt like most of the stuff that I've done there, people get. I mean, or maybe it just wasn't funny.
I mean, there's differences in culture, but for the most part, it's pretty similar on a global standard. But the jokes aren't going to go over our head. But I just thought maybe but we might find certain things offensive or not offensive. So you might be able to, take it to a new level. You might be able to produce or deliver some rawer jokes and get a bigger applaud or vice versa, more of a liberal crowd, precious crowd or an angry crowd, an aggressive crowd, a drunk crowd. Or
I mean, I don't worry about that too much. I used to when I started doing comedy, but now I don't worry. When I started, I used to look at a crowd. I'm like, oh, they look old or they look conservative or liberal, like whatever. And number one, you can never tell. And it's like, and it's not like old people haven't had sex either. It's like, you could do sex jokes. I don't know if it, but also it's like, you just never know, and so I think you just kind of stick to what you know and what you think's funniest and what you're happiest doing or saying then, and let it fly, because you're not going to please all the people all the time anyway. So it's like, there's times when you could be, oh, this is my crowd, and you get up there and you eat it, and you're like, I guess it wasn't my crowd, or I guess I wasn't on, or whatever,
Well, I was actually looking through your Instagram. Like I said, you've been to Australia a lot. You've been to Newcastle, so it's like you got a soft spot for me right there. But you had a picture.
I love Newcastle, by the way. I want to say Newcastle is a nice town. I took a train there. I took a train up there from Sydney the first time, and I've walked all around. There's like the walkway that's like a memorial kind of thing.
Called the Anzac Memorial.
Anzac Memorial, there you go.
I used to live directly opposite.
So I walked all up that, down by there's the skate park by the ocean. That was the first place I ever experienced public grills, because we don't have those in the United States. Claire, who I was mentioning before, that she took me when I first got there, and we just grilled sausages on a grill that was anyone was allowed to use, that had a gas. We don't have that here. You got to have your own grill or nothing. They'll have like some crappy ones you can put charcoal into. They're not as nice as the ones you guys. He has a much better public grill system, I'll say. But I really enjoyed Newcastle, and I like Australia in general. I'll tell you where I've been. You want to know where I've been in Australia?
Sure, go for it.
Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, Canberra, Hobart. I've been to Newcastle, been to Brisbane, Cairns, Darwin, been to Darwin and did gigs there.
Are these because you've toured as a comedian, or you just generally traveled?
These were all me touring as a comedian. Townsville. I even did some gigs with Townsville with Jim, which is like a smaller town up the coast there.
Yeah.
And I did these all with Jim, and then I did another tour with him. And then as I started to do the podcast with him, I said, let me go back and see if people will come out, and see me on my own. And people did, which was really blew my mind, because it's a country that's, 9,000 miles away from me. And I was like, it's crazy to me, so, but I love it.
Townsville and Cairns, I mean, it's kind of like the Florida of Australia. I mean, you got the tropics and the crocs.
Yeah.
The alligators.
Yeah, Townsville I've been to Townsville twice. It's like, I don't know if a lot of Americans go to Townsville, but there is the island off there. What is it called?
Locals call it Maggie, but it's Magnetic Island. It's
Magnetic
stunning. I
Island.
mean, yeah, it's like a working class town. It's got a military army base, a lot of farming, but it has changed. But yeah, you sort of get away from that. It's like Great Barrier Reef, Magnetic. It's stunning. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, and that's when we went to the Great Barrier Reef. We went out of Cairns, and we drove from Townsville to Cairns when we were there, and then went out on a big ferry thing, and then with a platform and stuff, and that was cool as a marine biologist to see the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah. Actually, what's your old professional opinion? Global is the coral reef dying? I used to have to do a lot of marine biologists up there.
I couldn't speak to the Great Barrier. I don't do any research there. I mean,
but how can you not? I mean, there's one thing to go see all the fish and everything, but also marine biologists. How do you not appreciate? Did you have the tourist hat on, or did you have the marine biology hat on when you're out in the reef?
Well, both. I mean, I was on like one of these huge ferry, one of these things that tourists go out on. So it wasn't like we're gonna, go to like diving in a spot that I went. It was going to be shallow. I knew it was probably going to be an area that might have some damage to it from all the tourists, like touching the coral and things like that. However, it was still way better than any reef fighter. It's such an ancient, in the Pacific and that whole side of the world, the reefs are much more ancient than the Atlantic ones, which are the ones I primarily dove and worked in and stuff. Even in the Caribbean, where it's like they're older reefs and stuff, they still can't even hold a candle to how old the reefs are there, how much relief is there and stuff like that. How high the reefs go and stuff. And the fish, it was still very impressive, even for where I was at, that I knew wasn't where I'd want to see the reef, But I mean, global warming is real, and it affects coral reef. I mean, coral reefs are affected primarily by temperature and salinity. Those are the two big things, and temperature, being that varying point. So, someone would argue, well, it'll get warmer down there and the reefs will move down there. Yeah, probably not. That's not how they work. They don't grow they don't grow like bamboo or something. It takes like hundreds of thousands of years and stuff. So I don't know what's going on. I can just go by what I've read, and what I've read scientists saying that there's massive bleaching and die-off and stuff like that. I've heard there's some parts that might be coming back, which is great. I don't know why that becomes a political thing where people, it's coming back. See, it is. Global warming isn't happening. Well, can we address that there's a problem, at least, like something's going on, instead of just like pushing back and forth? So, but it was impressive. It was impressive. It was cool.
Beautiful. Well, what really got my eye on your Instagram, you went to a rugby league match, and it was I'm very familiar with this. So it was the Sydney Roosters, like two Sydney clubs.
Yeah.
Why did you go to that?
It was the Roosters and the Dragons.
Bingo.
I think. Right. Yeah. It was on Anzac Day too.
They traditionally play Anzac Day. It's been going for about 100 years. Those two.
Do only people from Australia listen to this podcast, or you get people from all around the world?
Well, I did a podcast with the DJ from Limp Bizkit, and they got a strong following in Germany. Oddly enough. So, but yeah, for the most part, and a couple of Americans, but for the most part, Aussies.
Well, I didn't know what Anzac was. That's what I was saying. So I don't want to be like mansplaining Anzac if it's all Australians listening,
No, I can Google it.
Yeah. But anyways, in this country, we have Veterans Day or Memorial Day, where we're supposed to be in a similar vein, kind of, tipping our cap to veterans, memorializing and stuff. In this country, it becomes more about, hey, I got a holiday, I got a day off, let's do some barbecue, we're going to the beach, kind of thing. And there are some parades and things like that, but it is not celebrated, or at least there's not the respect paid that there is in Australia, which I witnessed firsthand there. So I was there, I don't remember what year that was. I want to say it was like 2017 maybe, or something like that. But so I was there, and I was there with Jim touring, and his nephew is in the military, and he was marching in a parade. So we went and watched that parade, and then we went to a bar at like whatever time it was, 10 in the morning, and they were playing the 1-up or 2-up, right? Two up game with the coin flip thing.
So you're probably like your mind's blown. You're like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, I ate a sausage breakfast, whatever that was, or some sandwich I had to eat. I pinned a sprig of rosemary to my thing, you know. And then I guess that's the traditional thing on that part too, is to go. There's all these rugby league games, right?
Yeah.
And so we
In
ended
Sydney,
up going there.
yeah.
Jim's manager supports one of those teams, and I'm trying to remember which one it is. I believe he's a Dragon supporter.
St. George Illawarra.
Yeah, I believe he's Dragon. So that's why we went to that game specifically, and he gave me a scarf. So I had to I was wearing a scarf there, and all the military presence, everything, the flags they were skydiving in and stuff like that. And because I think he's a Dragon supporter, because he's giving me some crap because I was given a Rabbitohs hat by Claire, who lives in Newcastle, comes back to Newcastle because she's originally from Sydney and she supported them. And I've worn that on the podcast recently, and that was like one of the biggest uproars on our podcast. He's wearing a Rabbitohs hat, which I know is famously owned by Russell Crowe too as well. So
save the club, you did.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, that's how I ended up there. It was fun. That was a fun day. That was a real Australian experience. I feel like being on Anzac Day and kind of going through all those motions of this is what you do. You get there, then you get to go to the parade. Now you get a beer in the morning. You're drinking, and you're.
Did you have a crack at 2 Up? Did you play it? Did you understand it?
I know, and I don't. I try not to gamble. I've had problems with gambling in my life. Famously, I've talked about it many times. So I didn't figure I would break the spell there on like just a bar. I watched.
We're the number one in Australia for that. Per head capita, we're the most gambling nation. Did you notice like the commercials? Like we just like it's legal just to advertise willy-nilly. Hey, you know, download this app, start gambling live, or like the poker machines. Per head capita, we got the most. So something like 2 or 3% or 5%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when there's 26 million people now, that's sort of we walking down the street thinking, holy shit, like what?
I do know that. I know that because we did a piece on it on Jim's show, so I'm aware of that. But also when I'm there, I've noticed it too. It's so cute you call them pokey machines there. Everything's got to end in an IE or a Y or whatever in Australia to make it sound like less threatening.
It's more efficient. Yeah.
Bikey is my favorite one where I was like, they sound like fun guys. Like they're nice. Bikey sounds cute. Like you can get on and I was like, oh, they're bikers. Okay, that's different than the
and our truckies just went to Australian Parliament House to protest for, you know, it's not the truckers, same thing. Yeah, the truckies.
Yeah. But I did know that. You know what's crazy is there's machines that, because I play a lot of casinos and stuff here, there's machines that I've seen in Australia, the pokey machines, that now they've taken over in the US. And also this thing you're talking about, we're on our way here. You see advertisements all the time for all these apps to gamble through. They don't have the live gambling yet, but it's a slippery slope of that happening. So I think the US won't be far behind on that. You know, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. We'll see. But yeah.
Well, in your travels, did you happen to get to the Outback at all? I think I've seen one of your pictures there and you're wearing like a look like you're in the Middle East, they're wearing a turban. And it could have been mistaken.
That was a woman's scarf that I borrowed. Yeah, because we were shooting a field piece for the Jim Jefferies show, and it was about the fence, the dingo fence.
Yeah.
And which is I guess one of the longest in the world or something like that, or longest fences in the world. You know.
That's right.
And we were out there, and it was the flies were. We were about. I'm trying to remember where we flew. We drove from Brisbane, maybe 2 or 3 hours west, and then we flew out of an airport that was in the middle of nowhere. And when we came back on this little crop duster thing coming back, because we didn't want to drive all the way back to Brisbane. It might have even been like a 4-hour ride or something like that. I'm looking on a map now of Brisbane. I don't know if we're going to be able to find it, but this airport was.
Toowoomba, Roma, it might have been.
I think it was Toowoomba.
Yeah, yep.
And I think that might have been the airport we flew out of, which was like, it was chill. That was the least stressful airport I've ever been. It was just like, come on in, no one's here. Just like, but I think it was outside of Toowoomba somewhere, and we were along there. And gosh, I'd heard about the flies and stuff when you get out there, but experiencing them was like, I don't know how you live out there.
Oh, yeah, struggle. Well, that's why 95% or something people live along the coast. You go inland, you got to have a certain type of personality or character to be able to absorb the outback, you know, and actually maintain. Most people go out there and go, oh, yeah, right, and that's it. Like, you know, like they can't deal. But it sounds like you've actually experienced more of Australia than most Australians. Of all the destinations you've been to, you've been quite fortunate. I mean, you've been to Tassie, through the outback, along the coast, like Darwin. It's really hard for people, like it's closer for people to Sydney to get to New Zealand, and it's sometimes cheaper than it is to go to these places you've been to. So you've seen a fair bit of Australia, and 5 times as well. But it really does seem like, you just didn't come down here all the times just to work. Like, have you gone out and like had a bit of downtime and experienced anything, like had a bit of a holiday within your touring?
I wouldn't say, well, sort of like, we would have days off, and I'm always, when I'm traveling, when I get to travel by myself, or if I travel with Jim or anywhere that I'm at, those days off, I always try to get as much in as I can, because who knows if you ever get to go back. I never thought I'd go to Australia once in my whole life. But then I became friends with Jim, started working with him, started opening for him, and now it's like, I would love to come to this year, but if I don't go, I'm like, I've been a bunch. I'm not going to be super upset, even though I'd love to go there. But I remember one of the down days in Perth, we went out to Rottnest Island, saw the quokkas.
Yeah,
I got a picture of me with a quokka. That's like mandatory that you get. And then we went out to like the Fremantle, go look at the statue of Bon Scott and stuff like that. We'll do, but the days off aren't really like, wow, we're going to take off and really dig in deep. It's more like, okay, what do you want to do today? Oh, we got 8 hours today. Let's go do walk to the top of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and stuff like that. Like, I'll still do experiences. So I definitely got a bit of that. And like I said, I went to the Great Barrier Reef, things like that. One of the coolest things, though, wasn't really Australia, is New Zealand. So we did a tour in New Zealand, and being a biologist, New Zealand is like this very rich, strange, interesting, world that's like unlike a lot of other countries. And we did this whole tour. Again, I hit every city you could probably hit in New Zealand with Jim, and Jim went back home, and I stayed there for another 10 days. And I really got to explore mainly the South Island.
South Island, yep.
Yeah.
So like your Milford Sound or so you're loving the mountains. You like the I've never been. I've only ever been to Auckland twice, but
yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of Aussies here be like, oh no, Australia's a lot better. But yeah, I've been to New Zealand twice, and yeah, I think they might have.
They're both great. I'm not going to say one's better than the other, but the South Island of New Zealand, you go down to Queenstown. First of all, you go to Mount Cook, that mountain, very impressive area, amazing hiking trails and places to stay. But if you get to the very bottom of the island there, South Island, and you get to Queenstown, and then there's a lake that runs down it, and there's a town called Glenorchy down there, and you can go up the rivers there. And this is where they shot all the Lord of the Rings stuff. And there's Milford Sound, as you mentioned. I've never seen anything. I've been there twice to those areas now. I've never seen anything like those places in my life ever. It's very awe-inspiring, and
what about Denver or being to the Canadian Rockies? How does it compare?
It feels different because it feels like you're in these mountains, but with New Zealand, it's like, okay, if you're in the Rockies, you're in a mountainous terrain, and you're in a certain type of biome or climate, kind of thing. With New Zealand, it'd be like, all right, we're in mountains right now. We're in a glacial fjord land or stuff like that. And then an hour or two later, you're in what looks like a wetland area that's warmer and stuff. And then you drive another 3 or 4 hours, you're by another mountain. It's like there's a glacier, and things change so rapidly there that it just feels almost like you're on a movie set, otherworldly. How did this just change so quick like that, because it is so isolated by itself over there. Australia is an island, obviously, but it's not that far, obviously, as we know, from Indonesia up on the top, and you still have these, I think on a map people don't realize. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners do, but it's like a 3.5 hour flight over there, isn't it? A 3 hour flight. It's far, it's more than halfway across, so it's sitting over by itself. But I know how Australians feel about New Zealanders. You guys love to hate them, but place
and vice versa. Absolutely. We got this it's like family. But we rather slag each other off.
Food is better in Australia, though. Food in Australia is phenomenal, I think. So,
really?
Yeah.
What is the food that you enjoyed here? I mean, United States cuisine and Australia, they're pretty similar, but same again, 1%ers. What are those things that you found?
Well, it feels like there's less preservatives and additives and things like that. It feels like the food's cleaner in Australia to me than it is in the United States.
Huh.
And I feel like, because of the way your country is situated, it's like a lot of the times, at least that's what I felt, the farmers market, like even when I'm in Adelaide, the central farmers market, or then Melbourne, I went to this big, it's like, it feels like in these major cities. So like, okay, we have farms outside of this town. This is where we grow our crops and we use them for this city. I'm sure that stuff gets shipped there, but whereas in America, it's like, you might get a tomato and you're like, this is from Guatemala. We import, you might get and they were trying to keep this avocado is not ripe yet. It's from,
a lot of things are imported.
Yeah. And you're not really having this, like, it's as close to a farm to table experience as you can have. I think where there's less, I put it this way. I didn't even like lamb until I had it in Australia, in Townsville. It was the first place when I had it, and in New Zealand too. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't taste like what in America.
You never had lamb?
I had lamb. I didn't like it. It didn't taste. So I don't know what we're doing to our meats. I just overall, even though the food was very similar, it just seemed fresher. It seemed like healthier. It seemed like less.
That's funny you should mention that, because we do a lot of preservatives. That does exist. So that puts in perspective where the preservatives are coming into the States.
Oh, yeah. You can't hold a torch to us. We're like...
But, I mean, I've been to LA 4 times. And the first time I went there, I thought, I'm in the United States. I really want to have an American burger. I've had burgers here. We love burgers, but it's originated from there. Went to this cafe, got this like half-pound American cheeseburger, and I was violently after that. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe there is something about the food. Oh, it was a cafe. It was my ex-girlfriend. We were in Culver City, so I just flew there. I was like so jet lagged, and I'm just like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I just want to go to an American diner. There's something about it. I've seen Happy Days, hopefully the Fonz, sort of that's something like that. And I had on the menu, like we got the quarter pounder at McDonald's, but it's like a half-pound cheeseburger from the cafe. I'm like, this looks delicious. And I was sick. I was very, very ill. Maybe there's a connection, as you were saying.
Well, you can't just get a cheeseburger anywhere in the United States, but it's going to be good. It's the United States. You have to like feel it. I mean, number one, if you're going to go through a drive-through, you go to In-N-Out Burger when you come to California. That's your number one. They not only is it fresh, and they make it fresh there, and the burger tastes great. They're also ethically, they locally source all their meats, so you're not getting them all around. They treat their employees the best. So that's your best burger and your best, and then you can move on down the line fast food wise. But if you just like, we're like, there's a diner, let's go. Like, I mean, Culver City is pretty close to the airport, so I'm assuming you're just like first place we could find on Yelp.
Well, she was from there. She's like, I mean, she was like Argentinian background, but she's like born and raised LA for the most part.
Yeah.
I just put all my trust in her, and that's what was delivered. Hence why one of the reasons ex-girlfriend.
Yeah. A terrible person.
But
yeah, seafood is really good, and your shrimps are better. I know you call them prawns, whatever, but our lobster's better. So that's how that works. But I do in New Zealand, the food wasn't like, I mean, if you go to a fine restaurant, sure, but I had one of the worst things I've ever eaten in South Island of New Zealand called mutton bird.
Well, can I just ask you a question? I just want to sort of back it up of what you were saying before. You've done a lot of travel, and can you just sort of explain? I was just sort of interested on how you actually prepare for one of your gigs. I mean, you'd have to be sort of conscious of the food you eat, of course, so you're not violently ill and, you got on stage. But what are some of the crowds that you perform to, like in terms of the size, the capacity? I mean, it seems like there's theaters, but also arenas, like, maybe 10,000 people.
I'm with Jim. Yeah, I've done that size in Australia, but I did a show 2 nights ago in a bar near the airport here in LA, and there was like 12 people there. So,
and now you're on this podcast. All right.
Yeah. Is that how many people listen to the podcast?
11. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
one day I'll get to 12.
So it's always different. I'm going to be doing 3 shows 2 nights from now on Saturday. And the first show will probably be a couple hundred people. And the second show might be 20. And then the next one might be 100.
Well, how do you go from 20 to 100 to thousands? What's the difference?
You don't really, it's not like you're varying up your act again for the amount of people. There might be some different things you do. If you're in a theater where there's 2,000 people, or you're in an arena or something like that, you have to play bigger because if you're just standing at the microphone, not moving around, people are looking at you on a TV or from far away, squinting their eyes, like, what's going on? Something happening? And it's good to kind of give your voice some range too. So you're down here and then you come up here and then you walk across over here I'm not saying you have to do backflips and go out of your wheelhouse if you're not a physical comedian, but you have to let people know there's somebody alive up on stage there, same way like a front man does that for a band. I didn't know that at the beginning. The first time I ever did like an arena, then it was in Australia in Perth. I didn't know really how to play it. So I don't know if that was my best set. I was kind of up there just like, yeah, anyway, I wasn't playing big. I was playing here instead of here,
Yeah.
But as far as material, you don't really change up your material. It's just more like how you're addressing that audience,
Did that
and so if you're playing for like 11 people in a bar, you're not going to be like, way. I mean, you can, but you're going to bring it down a little bit and be like, hey, what's up? Maybe make it more conversation.
You're talking instead of someone projecting.
Yeah. So that's the big difference, I think, but you kind of learn that over time. So the first arena I ever did was in Perth. It was a basketball arena there. And I want to say it was like 12,000 people or 14,000 people.
Did that play in your mind where you're thinking, shit, this isn't 20 people or 50 people in a club?
I just was more concerned.
People. Yeah.
I was more concerned because I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to play to 14, so I'm like, all right. So there was a comedian up before me and his name is escaping me right now, but this was opening for Jim. And he went up there and we had cordless mic and he went up there and he did his act and he was so excited. Younger guy, I can't do it with my knees, jumped off the front of the stage 6 feet down or whatever and just ran off. Hey! And the crowd started cheering. I go up on stage. There's no microphone there. He's taking the microphone by accident. Not like I'm perfect by that, and I'm just like looking for the microphone and then the promoters are like, wow. So, but this is what 14,000 people see in the way background. They're not like, oh, the microphone's gone. They're like, what's this idiot doing? I'm just like, and so then I went over and I got a microphone, but there's a good 30, 40 seconds, which is a long time to not be saying anything, where people are just like, this sucks, like whatever. And then I'm kind of already up against it. This is my first time ever performing in a crowd that big. And I did my set and I don't think it went well by any means. And I also was just like, well, that wasn't the way I needed to start that, So that was my first experience. And then from there I learned and I think got better, but doing arenas is hard. I'll tell you what is a good spot. 2,000 people in a theater. That's like awesome.
Why is that the sweet spot?
Because they're still close enough to you to where everyone can see. They don't have to look on TVs and stuff like that. Most theaters are designed where you almost don't even need a microphone because some of these theaters were before they had big PA systems and stuff like that.
Got like a natural acoustics. Yeah.
Yeah. So people can hear you properly. And then also in theaters versus like a comedy club or something, which I play comedy clubs, I like it, but in a comedy club, it's like, yeah, come on in. We got a 2-for-1 special. You want steak? You want a drink? You want this? In America, comedy clubs are big about the food and the drinks, and people are like eating and making orders, and they're not financially invested in either because maybe the tickets are $15, $20 versus you go to a theater, the tickets are $70. So, and everyone's facing forward in the theater instead of like kind of like this, like
pressure's up. Yeah, I guess that does half the battle for you. Like, I mean, if the comic's bombing but the food's delicious, you're like, well, I got some value out of this experience. Yeah. But if you're just paying and like, you better be funny. I've paid some money to laugh here. So yeah, got more pressure on you.
But here's the thing is, only time I'm doing theaters is if I'm opening for a big comedian like Jim and other comedians that I've opened for. So I'm usually doing comedy clubs where I'm, it's maybe 200 people at a time, still fun, but lower ceilings, tighter room. And they're really like, we haven't heard of you. Come on, like make us laugh. But that's part of the gig. So, but I've been lucky enough. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have done those big gigs and also traveled as much as I have, because a lot of the traveling you've seen, I've traveled some before as a comedian, but the bulk of what I've done, filling out my passports and stuff like that, has been because I've been a comedian.
Yeah. Well, where did you go independently? Just like, not for touring as a comedian, but just as a traveler.
Well, I went back to New Zealand with my girlfriend at the time. So that was just a trip that went back there on our own.
Because I think you've seen her around Thailand. I think you've even possibly.
That was for comedy. I went there. I went there.
How do you do comedy in like? I've spent a lot of time in Thailand, so I'm quite familiar with it. How do you deliver that style of comedy to an audience in Bangkok?
There's a comedy club there, and it's called, I want to say, Comedy Club Bangkok, something simple like that. And I went through this whole tour all the way from Taiwan all the way down through Southeast Asia with Jim. And as I was doing that tour, people said, "Hey, come back through." So I came back to Bali, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Singapore, and Hong Kong on my own and did my own shows. And so I went back there and I went to these comedy clubs, and there's a combination. There's people that speak English there. A lot of the people, some of them went to school in the States and came back, especially in Korea and Taiwan and Singapore. And a lot of those people have and also there was some people from the United States that came to the comedy club. They were just touring. Like, hey, let's go to the comedy club. Yeah. Or people that live there. When I was in Singapore and I came back through there on my own and did the shows, I was there for Chinese Lunar New Year. And the guy goes, "We never do shows Chinese Lunar New Year." I said, "Well, I'm going to be here for like 5 days. If we can maybe pay for my hotel, and we'll do I'm just negotiating." That trip was more about, I was doing comedy, but when I went back through on my own, that was more about, let's get to see these places that I only saw for 48 hours and come back and really, get a feel for them and stuff. So I go back to Singapore and he goes, "We'll see what happens. Hopefully some people show up for this." Well, it was standing room only. Probably not. Some of them had seen me come through with Jim before that, but a lot of it was, most of them were expats, and they're like, "There's nothing to do, Chinese, everything's closed. This is so it was filled to the rafters." He goes, "Yeah, maybe I should do more shows on China." "Yeah, maybe you should. Maybe there's people that are looking for something to do, So, but so people get the comedy, they understand it, and that was a cool tour because technically I was there doing comedy, but I was really kind of catching the sights and getting to do stuff. When I was in Kuala Lumpur coming through there with Jim for 24 hours, so I didn't see anything. Went back there and I stayed there for 3 days and did the comedy club there. And I got to go to all these different cool sites and experience things. And so that was neat. So try to do that.
Well, you mentioned a few times you worked on the Jim Jefferies show. I think I've seen a couple of them, or maybe just highlights on Facebook. What were you doing on the show? How were you a part of it?
I was a writer on the show. Yeah.
Right.
And yeah. And so since I opened for him, I got that we'd do field pieces for the show too, where Jim would be in other countries around the world reporting on something that we were, making funny, but also making a point at the same time. And so it was kind of twofold. I get to tour around and work on that for the show and also get to open for Jim. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Speaking of very cool, I noticed Brad Pitt somehow got on the show. Would you be able to fill us in? How the hell did you manage, or were you a part of being able to get Brad Pitt as a person on the show a few times?
He was a fan of Jim's. He ends up being a fan of Jim's sitcom, legit. And they're in the same management company, and not the same managers. And I guess he reached out to Jim, and he asked Jim to do him a favor to interview him for this Netflix show. Jim didn't know him, but they became friends. And then he goes, "If you need me to do anything, let me know." And Jim's like, "Oh, maybe you could be on the show." And then they came up with the idea of him being the weatherman. And he said, that'd be cool when he's this doomsday, climate change scenario. And he couldn't be nicer. He was we wrote 6 scripts for him and said, "Which one do you think is the best that you want to do?" He's like, "How about we do all of them?" Okay.
Is that a bit of a spin it for you? You're writing a script and who's going to be doing this? Holy shit. It's one of the biggest Hollywood stars of all time.
Yeah, it was really cool for him. I didn't write any of those scripts, to be fair, but because you're writing different things, but it was really cool for him to do. It was just cool that he was on the show. And it was I'm telling you, people will say, "Oh, that guy's really cool," or "That guy's," for the level of celebrity that he is, which is one of the most famous people in the world, arguably, and he couldn't have been cooler. And he was just all about "Hey, let's have some fun, let's come in there." And to the point where he even did one on location in Venice. He just did that on his own. He goes, "I'm just going to send one in and report from Venice." Okay. So it was really helpful to our show because, it was on the first episode and there was a bunch of episodes after and stuff. So it doesn't hurt to have Brad Pitt on your show, helping them promote it. So yeah, he's just a really guy, and he likes comedy and he likes Jim. So it was just this whole thing the way it worked, and they're still friends to this day. So it was a really cool thing,
Oh man, absolutely.
Yeah.
Got one final question, but then we can start to wrap it up. But I was doing some bit of homework, and it is something about Jim Jefferies. It's on Wikipedia. His name isn't actually Jim. It's but I might be able to clarify this. It's Jeff James Nugent.
Uh-huh.
Do you call him Jeff? Does he still go by Jeff, or is it Jim?
I
Or is
call
it-
him
there's-
Jim. I
so-
call him Jim. I know him as Jim, but his family will call him by his name. So, because that's how they know him. But yeah, it was a stage name that he, I guess, people were messing up. I don't know. He would tell you a story better, but as far as I think, people would mess up his name, Jeffrey Nugent. They get it messed up. So then he came up with Jim Jefferies because thought that was easier. Then he had to change the spelling because there was someone else, either a musician or another comedian, or not another comedian, like maybe a musician or something that had the similar spelling. So that's why he added the extra E. I call him Jim. Most people in America call him Jim. I never see anyone here call him by his birth name, but I've met his parents and his brothers and cousin and stuff, and they all call him Jeffrey.
That must be a spin out. Yeah, you got sort of a duality of your identity.
Yeah, but it's close because his last name is his first. The same thing.
Jim,
yeah.
Jeff, tomato.
Yeah, but it's in Wikipedia. Not everything's always true, but that one's true. Yeah. So, but he's talked about it. I'm pretty sure that's the story. I should know as a friend of his. I should have the story better, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
Well, Forrest, hopefully, like I said, I didn't even know Jim's touring Australia, but hopefully you can come down again. So it'll be visit number 6, I believe.
Yeah, I'll be there again at some point. But yeah, I don't know when, but I'll be there again at some point. Yeah, it'd be 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it'd be 6.
All right. Well,
to be fair, one time was like 2 days, so I don't even count that. But it's on my way to New Zealand.
A friend of mine's just opened up a new comedy club. It's only 2 months old, 3 months old, maybe. It's in Newcastle. It's got about 60, 70 people capacity. It's a purpose-built comedy club. People there just for that. Please, if you make it down, make it to Newcastle.
Are you booking me for it? Are you booking me for the guy?
I'm just planting the seed. I'm just planting the seed.
Yeah, okay.
But I can book you, and I know I'm friends with the guys there, so won't be the ground and anchor, but it's the same sort of people, I've no doubt. But
tell them to pay for my flight to Australia. I'm good. We're there. Real easy. Yeah.
No worries. Well, Forrest, mate, really appreciate your time. It's been a very enjoyable chat for myself. I'm always interested to meet sort of comics, and they're very, haven't found one who's not very entertaining and also matching very intellectual. And you've certainly got a load of grey matter between those ears. So I really appreciate it and all your insights about everything that you've just talked about.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. It was fun being on here, even though your map's sideways and it's been bothering me the whole time.
Oh, no, it's a little bit distracting. So my budget for this podcast is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I can tell. Set design through the roof. So.
I know, but it's all about the budget, and it gets it done.
Yeah, I know. It was fun.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Forrest. You made it to the end of the podcast. All right. You know the drill. Give us a like, subscribe, or leave some juicy comments. And thank you so much for listening to Get Lost with the Travel Guide, where we talk all things travel, tourism, and adventure. See you next time.